really are. Yeah, I think a lot of podcasts and media in general, so not only podcasts, but just anything where you're putting yourself out there in the world, social media or articles or anything, people really overly polish things and
Hmm.
overly rehearse. And I think collectively we're so exhausted with the facade,
Yeah,
of
I know exactly what you mean. The rehearsed part.
yeah, everything feels fake. So to have something that's real has always been really important to me.
Mm,
I've always made a point to never use like filters or scripts or anything. I just show up as my messy self,
yep,
as is,
yep.
without any sort of like I don't know. People, they go into the smallest of details with things, but I always wanted people to know that there was nothing special about me, that they were just as capable of doing all of the things as any other one of us is. So, I,
Love that.
yeah.
Yeah, it's the invitation. Yeah, the permission.
hmm
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are. Where are you
Oh my
from?
gosh.
Where was your
I'm
background?
where I grew up. I grew up in Southern California my whole life.
Okay,
I
I
still
found
live here.
and you still live there?
Yeah.
I
I'm in
find that
San Diego now.
the location of our upbringing has an enormous uh, influence on how we become and how we develop and our belief systems. People, it's so funny when I have people from Europe on and we'll start talking and you really get tidbits of information of how they don't understand how big the US actually is. So they collectively box us into categories that kind of span like, oh, Americans, but like it's so vast from one end to the other. It's a completely
Right.
different country essentially
Yeah.
from one place to another.
Yeah, I hear you. Like culturally, I think is what you're saying, right? Even
Yeah.
culturally from within. Yeah. And I grew up in like what do they call it? Like an urban jungle. Like there was hardly any grass. Like thank goodness there was a park nearby, but otherwise there like wasn't trees necessarily and very little grass and it was definitely and it does influence like my story, at least the story specifically that I finally kind of landed on why my life, what kind of example my life is supposed to be for other people and like what kind of message and legacy I'm supposed to leave behind. And they're all related. So I love, and no one's ever really asked me this question in this way before. So I really appreciate starting this way. But, like I had to define pleasure, you know, in the midst of an environment that pleasure wasn't a default and pleasure wasn't the natural state. And we didn't look at life through the eyes of how can we make it feel more pleasurable? It was more like, how do we survive? And those are two really different things, like survival and safety, or a relief of suffering or pain versus pleasure. So you're right. I love that. I love that you're right in the question that you asked and in the statement that you made.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have just been in survival mode generationally. Um, the standard and the default up until recent times has been struggle and strife. You excuse me, sorry. Uh, our memories are really short. We don't, because our memories only last as long as the individual. Me and you, we can remember up into a point, but before that, it's just unless we've studied the history of and really put ourselves in the the shoes of those who came before us and the types of lives that they left and led and what was normal for them, we can't we forget that, my dad, for example, that's one generation. My dad didn't have running water or indoor plumbing when he was growing up in his home. My grandmother, they made all of their own clothes and mattresses out of rice sacks and slept on the ground. The first time she ever went into a city, she laid down in the back seat of the truck of the car because she was terrified because just of all of the hustle and bustle around. I,
Mm.
my ancestors grew up in the woods, so I grew up in the woods. I grew up on farms, like several of them. So I was always in nature, which was a stark contrast, it sounds, to your upbringing.
Yeah, and it's funny because my like if you go two generations back, maybe three generations back, my family, and I don't know a whole lot, but they were like sunflower farmers and they came, from the East Coast toward the West. And then if you get to my grandfather, became an engineer for like the Spruce Goose and Howard Hughes and had kind of more of a glamorous life. And he was one of those like barbershop quartet singers on the radio. That was his hobby that he used because he worked for Northrop and like these engineering companies. And that, so my mother ended up with kind of a little bit more of a glamorous childhood, even in the military. Like there were a lot these pictures of her, like these photo shoots they would do with my mother where she looked like Shirley Temple. And, I think they were kind of like hoping that to get in kind of like more of the Hollywood kind of lifestyle. And then, they both had some pretty decent trauma in their childhoods. And my grandmother became like a violent alcoholic schizophrenic. And so, like, whatever that vision was for their family, it became something else. And so by the time I was born, I was the youngest of three. My mother's life was really upside down and she was a single mom with very little skills, in the way that she grew up, and then of course her violent past. And so, that was the ingredients that were available by the time I was born, and that certainly dictated, a certain way of growing up, and her having to work really hard and not being around a whole lot for my upbringing.
Yeah, that's uh, for children, whatever you're seeped in, whatever you're grown in, is the only thing you know. And kids these days have a little bit more access to what is possible and other options that they may have and different directions that they can turn. But before the internet and social media, especially, and YouTube, we only had the examples that were in front of us. We didn't know that there were any other options. We couldn't even fathom other options. I know sorry, I've been sick, so it's taken me forever to get rid of this cough. I
Mm.
have to clear my throat constantly. But um, the only thing I ever really knew was that what I was seeing wasn't right. What I was experiencing wasn't right. I felt like I was like, I don't understand why you're being mean. I know what mean is and I know what nice is, and we're not being nice. But other than that, I had no direction. I had no way to turn, and I had no guidance. And I grew up in the Bible Belt, so everything
Mm.
was soaked in very conservative, religious things and nature. That was about all we had to work with. And thank goodness I had nature because I could just disappear into the woods
Mm.
for hours at a time, and that became my church, and that became my meditative practice and my
Mm.
connection to source and my connection to things in life. And it essentially saved me. It gave me a an outlet. But are you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yes. Hmm.
Okay. So, I think allowing ourselves to turn to anything pleasurable is more of a new concept because we were too busy trying to survive
Hmm.
collectively,
Yep.
historically. Many still are in the world. And when you're literally struggling for food and water and shelter, clothing, which we're so lucky these days that the vast majority of us don't understand what that struggle is even for a second. We might think we do, but unless you've really experienced hunger and the terror of not knowing where you're going to sleep tonight, what if it's too cold? What if you don't have any water tomorrow? Like yada yada yada. if you're worried about those things, you can't even fathom moving up the pyramid to find the pleasures in life or connection with other people or, finding your purpose and your place and self-actualization. So I
Well,
think
part of that depends on your definition of pleasure. So like
sure.
some people will misinterpret because I also come from like the kink and BDSM communities or the erotic, the sex positive spaces. They'll make the mistake that they think that my definition of pleasure means body pleasure or bedroom pleasure or something like that. But my definition of pleasure is aliveness. And I totally get what you mean by if you when you're in survival mode, you don't have the bandwidth for, what one definition of pleasure might be. But I can think back even in my childhood because I also didn't there was a lot of food scarcity where I lived as well. We did have a house. My mother had to fight to keep it every month. I would hear her on the phone with the utility companies, to hope to keep the water on, to hope to keep the electrical on, to hope to get an extra week or 10 days to pay the mortgage. So I had a roof and it didn't feel like that was absolutely going to be ripped away, but food was very scarce. And, even within the context of that poor upbringing, we found ways to feel more alive. We found ways to play games and to conjure up some mischief that felt like fun. And so I guess fun might be a definition of pleasure in the context of my childhood. We would maybe my it was my two older brothers and myself, and sometimes like one older brother and me would lie in wait, waiting for the other one to arrive home, and we would turn the couches over, and then we would have these spitballs so it just took a straw and paper, and you'd roll the paper up into little balls, and you'd spit them through the straw. So when one of my other brothers would get home, it was on, like the war was on when they walked through the door. And so we were able to kind of pick up moments of aliveness, through play and fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, I believe deeply in turning towards the children in your life and letting them teach you more than you teach them.
Mm.
Like, yeah, we need to teach them how to read and how math works but they teach us how to be alive.
They
And
remind us how to play. I agree. And part of the campaign for like my Pleasure Renaissance campaign, which is about restoring pleasure as like the main way that we choose to live and thrive in our lives instead of survival and competition. And I lost my train of thought on what I was going to say. Oh, the innocence.
mm,
There's an innocence to pleasure, right? So like, that's what I want to talk about with people too, because even as we go to talk about actual erotic pleasure, there's an innocence in that too. And we have we've altered the way it's like we have this cultural narrative that pleasure is something that is meant to be an indulgence, or it's something you have to earn, or
they've
it's something you have to
demonized it.
ration, right? Like that's the part that I'm really trying to fight. I'm trying to
Mhm.
create a new cultural narrative, or really an old cultural narrative, to reclaim the innocence of aliveness and pleasure and how we choose to be present in a moment with our cup of tea or our glass of water. That can be as much of a moment of aliveness as, bedroom play or climax or something that other people, that want to think sort of more black and white will misconstrue my message. So I
Yeah, no,
appreciate this conversation.
I agree completely. And I think that because we've taken the innocence out of it and we've made it a taboo, we've demonized it, we've made it a bad thing, has done a lot of damage
Yeah.
to a lot of different areas of culture. And um,
We've built entire governmental systems that carry the message that pleasure is an indulgence, and it's not something that we're sort of allowed to have unless we've earned it in some way. Like entire cultures, entire hierarchies, social hierarchies and governments as well.
yeah, I have this theory that is not something that any most people want to hear, for
Oh, I
sure.
can't wait. I can't
Oh
wait.
gosh, it's gonna get me.
Taboo.
But I don't feel like the terrible things that we see with like sex trafficking and children being involved in those types of things. would be as prominent if we didn't demonize and taboo the innocence of that sort of thing. So people who when you demonize something and we make it taboo, it begins to thrive in the shadows instead of in the
Right.
open. And when it's in the open, it can be managed and redirected and um, I get policed even if it needs to be. And we can collectively, you know, stop the bad things from happening before they happen rather than allowing them to. If you don't talk about it, if it's not in the open, then it moves to
Yeah,
the.
if you're suppressing, I think is what you're stretching for, right? The suppression of it. And I agree. In fact, in the book that came out this year, Forbidden Alchemy, there's like a whole talk about like the suppression of sadism. And, like we all are sadists, but we pretend we're not. And it's the suppression of that or like the black and white thinking with regards to like, the natural sadism within us that builds up just like you're suggesting. It's like the things like Carl Jung would say, it's the suppression of the shadow that builds up and it doesn't go away. Like, so if we're not willing to look at these pieces of ourselves and welcome them home, that's when they build up into compulsions and things that set us up to harm other people or harm ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, yeah. I was trying to hold on to my thought, but also not be one of those people who were just waiting to speak. So I was paying attention and then I lost it. Should have wrote it down really quick.
Mm.
Uh,
But you were,
oh, the shadow work aspect. And yes, we all want to believe that and suppress all of the darkness within us instead of understanding that we are all both light and dark. And as much light as present can only be there because the dark is also present.
right, the
We have to have
contrast.
contrast.
Hmm. Yeah, and shadow, like I don't love the word because it has such a connotation of somehow it being bad or something that to be judged. But shadow really is only meant to be that it's hidden because sometimes they're even hidden from ourselves. Like I can certainly speak to my experience. When I was 5 and 6, I got introduced to the pleasure of my body really young at 5 and 6. At 5, it was with the babysitter's husband. It was inappropriate. And at 6, it was with my oldest brother, also inappropriate. And even though I didn't really fully understand, what was happening to me or could really consent to what was happening to my body, I did feel pleasure. That my body, my 5 and 6 year old body felt pleasure. And that's what became so confusing because at the time they were of course also wanting me to keep all of the interactions a secret. And so the way that they did that was to instill fear and shame
Mhm.
on me about what we were doing and my experience of it. And so I came to like define my pleasure as something to be afraid of,
Mhm.
something that threatened my safety and that people would punish me or abandon me if they found out that I was having this pleasure. And even later, when both of the perpetrators ultimately died, and I felt more able to speak about my experience. People rightfully so and well-meaning would say things like, I'm so sorry that happened to you, or that's such a terrible thing, that thing that happened to you. And I understand, of course, as an adult what they're talking about, but the child in me, it just reinforced the child's shame
Mhm.
around her actual bodily pleasure. And not only did that translate to like my bedroom play and like the way that I interacted with lovers at a young age, but even to all of my life in general, like I was a comic book and video game writer. I was a wife of a long 27-year marriage. I was a mom to two amazing children. And even those peak experiences where I was in life and should have been like, at the height of my pleasure in my life, I was still subconsciously programming that if I had reached some sort of like joy threshold or pleasure threshold, that was still a threat. And so I would like subconsciously sabotage those peak experiences, even when my life was at its height. And it took me decades just to even like notice the pattern and then start to unwind it.
Sure. And we all, yeah, we mean well, but we're all learning together. We're all learning how to navigate these things without causing more harm. And that is the hard part, and I've had a few chaplains come onto the show, and so we've
Mm.
talked about like death a lot, and
Mm.
which is, different than this, but also traumatic and has like a process and stuff, and the best thing that I can relate to at the moment with it. But they always say like there's nothing that you could say to make it better, but there's a million things you could say to make it worse. And so the best thing for interacting with anybody who's experienced anything dramatic like that is just listening and witnessing and allowing them a safe place to let you know how their experience was instead of you pinning labels or identifying their experience as this or that for them, which isn't always helpful.
Yeah, what you're bringing up, just the fact that we have a way of talking about this now, like there's a certain kind of emotional literacy and emotional intelligence
Mm.
and common language finally, because of the internet and everything, like we're able to speak about these things in no way like they could when I was younger, a couple of decades ago. We weren't talking about therapy and depression and anxiety. Those weren't even, they just, that was those were shameful things to talk
Oh yeah.
about.
10
So
years ago.
we're so lucky. Yeah, we're so lucky to be in the era that we are in. And I believe that, shadow work, while it's super important for us to know what that is and to know that it's part of the process of, say, climbing out of that survival mode, but that shadow work itself keeps us in this loop of survival mode. It keeps us, it trains our nervous system to look for safety and to look for like the absence of pain. Where when you go to orient your life toward this is a pleasure, I want to reach for my aliveness instead, it trains the nervous system to look for ways to feel more alive. And those are very two different point of views to be actually living and embodying your everyday life.
Yeah, because it's all creative energy. Because the I assume that you are familiar with the chakras as well.
Yeah.
And so the pleasure center is the sacral chakra, which is also your creative center, which is also where your inner child lives, where it's also where, obviously it's the reproductive system. So it's literal creation, literal life.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
You're way ahead of a lot of people that I speak to about it because it's like our arousal, like that thing that like picks our heart rate up a little bit and makes us suddenly like pique our interest. Like that literally is like whoop, like potential energy. And you
Mhm.
can do anything you want with it like that. Even on a practical level, when I was writing comic books and video games, like I would get into some sort of like writer's block. And I learned to self-pleasure to and stirred energy back up and then wouldn't finish, right? So no climax, but stirred the energy back up and then went back to writing and it would unlock and I would move through that wall because it was stirring up that creative potential energy. And I
That's so
could
cool.
then direct it.
The alchemy that we get. That's what the book is about, isn't it? Forbidden alchemy.
It is. It is. Yeah. Yeah. And it's and
So,
it's how to take the taboos, like the stuff that you have the most shame about, because those are like those are the deepest of the wounds, the ones that we carry shame and we hide. And so when you go to pluck those out, right, by alchemizing those really deep shame wounds, all of the coping mechanisms that have been built. I'm doing this visual gesture because I think of it as a Jenga tower. So like the bottom of the Jenga tower are those original wounds, and the blocks on top of them are all the coping mechanisms that we build as a result of those original wounds. And so when you pluck that bottom block, all of the coping mechanisms that you've learned pretty much fade away. I mean, yes, there's some retraining of the way the mind works and how you embody your life on an everyday level, but once those wounds are plucked, your life transforms in a really dramatic way. And so the book is really just doesn't hide. Like it talks about kink and BDSM, it talks about sex positive queerness, it talks about forbidden relationships, ways of relating differently in both sexually and in relationship. And so it tackles more than one category of forbidden and taboo.
cool, which is like what Tantra does as well, right?
So that's interesting. So when you use the word tantra, I'm hearing you using what you're actually talking about is neo tantra, which is a very westernized version of tantra. Tantra, if you actually look up the basis of the philosophy, it's more like Buddhism or Taoism. So it's a much broader philosophy than just energetic sex, which is like
Oh, sure, sure, sure.
everybody in America thinks of it as that, when it's so much broader than that. It's only one like arm of like eight different like categories of what actually makes up tantra.
Right, because in Western culture, we always want to like section things off. Like the medical system is a really good example of this, where you go to a podiatrist for your feet, and then you go to a neurologist for your head, as if the two are not connected. And like, yes, there's specializations and branches and depthness to that, but also in language. In English, we have a very linear way of speaking. So A plus B equals C. And then in Eastern languages and cultures, everything's more circular. So A plus B can equal C, but it can also equal D, or it can equal F, or it can equal Z. They have like a much more holistic view of the person, the life, the universe. It's all connected, all the things. And so I believe uh, that's just us in Western culture looking at Tantra and being like, oh, that's the sex yoga. Uh, that's another way
And,
of,
and it's sexy and it's marketable and
yeah, sex
because of our
sells, right?
sexually repressed society, generations long, yeah. So it's, of course, that's where the focus would be.
Yep, because it's more interesting when it's taboo, when it's suppressed. But, and that's just like, everybody wants to focus on the higher chakras. They want the intuition, they want the decision making, they want the psychic abilities, but they don't want to address the physical aspects. It's so funny that I see this so often in clients. They either are completely focused on the physical and the lower chakras, or they're completely focused on the non-physical and the higher chakras, and they never want to cross the bridge to
Yeah.
combine the two. But
Yeah.
combining both the non-physical and the physical is how you find wholeness in all the things,
Yeah.
which
And the divine path. I mean, that's why I call myself an erotic mystic. So, like, my mysticism, my connection to the divine is through my body and through sensation. And again, not only sexual and erotic sensation, but like I can have like a sacrament meal. Like food is a thing for me. Like food is like another love. And like it's such a deeply sensual experience. And so I can have a sacred meal that feels orgasmic to me if I know how to tune my sensations to receive it that way. And so that is equally, let's say, impactful and holy to me than praying. It's just about
absolutely.
how I'm showing up.
Yeah, everything's intimate. So, food being intimate.
Everything's intimate. I just like that. That's a great sentence. Everything's intimate.
Well, again, we're always wanting to section things off, but it's just one big soup. There's no, the soup penetrates the potatoes and the carrots, just like, it's not a separate thing. You don't have, and maybe it starts out separate, but it all comes into being the same thing. And so it's really easy. You hear that food is intimate often because it's an
Mm,
easy intro, it's an easy stepping stone to get you into the depths of all of the other things. But uh your home is just as intimate as the relationship with your pets or your family and it gets so muddled because people make things too complex and too muddled, and they allow things to get muddled when it can be simple, and that's when it loses the innocence, is when we complicate it.
mm,
um I
mm,
my my family, bless their souls, were trying their best to protect me, and in doing so uh instilled a lot of fear around predators. So I grew up from the moment I was big enough to learn how to defend myself at all. My dad was like, let me show you how all these guns work. Let me show you how these knives work. Let me show you martial arts. Let's, predators, dangerous people all over the place. Can't trust anybody. Everybody's a monster. Everybody's terrible.
Mm.
And
Mm.
yeah, so
Because there's a badassery to all of that, but the underlying like motivation is fear. You should be afraid. You should be watchful. Yeah, my mother very much the same. Fear, be afraid of everything. Don't fly out of the country. Don't do that. Don't do
yeah,
this.
oh
Yeah,
yeah, oh yeah. Other countries are terrifying.
yeah,
I don't think so.
right.
But yes, I almost had the opportunity. Well, I did have the opportunity to go to Canada one time, and my family was just like, absolutely not. What are you doing?
Did you have a great time?
I didn't get to go.
Oh shit. Oh damn.
Yeah, it was. I'm still a little sad about it, just because that was my first, only, and last opportunity I've ever had to leave the country, even just for a little while. We were supposed to go skiing. My grandfather wanted to take me skiing, and yeah. Anyway, um, so that did a lot of damage to me in innocent relationships, and so I had a really hard time until my mid 20s. And so I don't want to be misleading. Um, I've never had to really concern myself with romantic relationships. I was super lucky to find my husband when we were 16, and we've been together since. So when I say, I mean like the innocent relationships is what I
Yeah.
struggled with.
Mm.
It was like I wasn't allowed to get too close to anyone because inevitably too close crossed that line. And I mean, even as a kid, sometimes those innocent relationships did cross the line. And I never really thought much about it until I became an adult and I was just, pondering all of these things and how A connects to B and develops C and D. And it's because it was always made taboo, so it was hidden. And there's a point when children, for example, I remember when I was little, my family, there was hugs, there was cuddles, there was all of that. And then when I hit about, 12-ish, you start hitting puberty, it's all of a sudden it's inappropriate now for hugs and cuddles.
Yeah.
It's damaging to the
Yeah.
innocence of building those innocent relationships and learning how to navigate um, the appropriate with the inappropriate, because now it's just there is no appropriate, it's all inappropriate. And that can do
Yeah.
a lot of damage as well.
Which builds a lot of shame. And you don't know why, because no one's really explaining to you, even
Oh
at
no.
12, like why you should feel this way or why they feel this way. It's really their discomfort that they don't know how to describe. And all we do is internalize it as, oh, there's something to be ashamed of about my
Hmm.
body or about my boobs or whatever, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they're telling you to cover up, and
Yeah.
I I have a daughter. I have a daughter. She is 7, and she is teaching me all sorts of things about what is normal and natural and innocent.
Yeah.
And so I've got a front row seat to this child that is innocent and loving and hugs and kisses and holds hands with her friends, and it is just, a beautiful thing. And I try so hard to never make her feel any type of way about her body being bad. And I see her friends come over and who have had this
A
already.
different kind of being raised. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just witnessing. I don't try to influence one way or another. I just kind of like be a safe place, and if they say something or, like what was she someone told her one day that allowing your belly to show is yucky.
Hmm.
Okay. So instead of like putting my opinions on that on top of, what she's heard, I just ask questions. Oh, why? But I don't understand why, and so allowing them to help me even figure out how to go about the most positive and healthy way of helping them navigate life.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
I would say that makes me think of other things too that like I was teaching my children too, like whether people could have multiple relationships or about, non heterosexual, orientation and like and what came to mind as you were telling the story is yeah, people do. There are people that say that showing your belly is yucky. There are also people that say that showing your belly is really great and fun and playful and and innocent. So like you can offer more, we can all offer expanded thoughts that don't condemn the ones that are already being offered, but acknowledge those and then add more to that. And
Yeah.
that I know that I've always wanted my kids to be able, it's not that I want to tell them how to think, it's I want to teach them how to think. And so that I'm not telling them this is the way the world is, but that here's the way to evaluate when you hear opposing thoughts, you know. So we would talk at the dinner table about, polarized responses to the world around us, and so that they could figure out where in the sandbox of one extreme to the other, they were going to land. And even that is malleable, right? That could
Hmm.
change over time for them too. And I remember, in fact, because my husband and I opened our marriage around halfway through that 27 years, and it took quite a few years for the kids to be old enough for us to start sharing that we had polyamorous relationships and other closeness with other people. And later, when my kids were old enough, because I used to also lead discussion groups on ethical non-monogamy out here in San Diego. So when they got old enough to come share their experience, they both volunteered to come and speak with the people that I talked with. So as the adult children of polyamorous parents, they were able to speak about their experience. And my younger son, he said that the only thing he would have done differently was that we had socialized other religions. We had socialized, non-heterosexual relationships, but we had not socialized polyamory. Like, I think that my husband and I, until we felt like he was ready for that conversation, we were so careful to that we were going to get caught in some way or be not ready to talk about it that we failed to socialize the fact that people had multiple romantic relationships and that that was a possibility. So I remember him because I gave him questions ahead of time, but I didn't want him to feel like he needed to answer them in any particular way. So that one came out as a surprise on the day that he came to talk with the group. But yeah, our children, like again, like that's really my thought is that we teach them how to discern
Hmm.
for themselves rather than trying to make them into something specifically what we want or what makes us uncomfortable or not uncomfortable. It's
Yeah,
such a big job.
it is. Teaching them how to think for themselves is kind of a it's a hack. It's a good way to go about things. Uh Not only because well, they get so much information now. They're constantly bombarded with this and that, and everything's so politicized now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, which is, used to, like you said earlier, used to we couldn't talk about these things at all. And so now it's become more common to talk about it, and we're able to talk about it, which is a beautiful thing. Yay, freedom of speech. That's great. And talking about ideas is how you figure things out together and decipher what works for each individual person in question. And communication, oh man, man, communication. That is a beautiful art that so many people are not capable of doing. They know how to speak, but they
Yeah.
also don't have any idea how to speak. They don't know how to communicate their needs or their thoughts or, just practical information. Um, Everything being so polarized, I think you have to make a mess to clean a mess. And anytime there's a pendulum, we overcorrect before we level out. So I feel like things are finally starting to level out. It takes time, and I think it's taking a lot less time for us to level things out than it historically has, which is great for our progress as a society and culture. Because at the end of the day, everyone has an opinion about what's right and what's wrong, but all that truly matters is what is healthy
For
for
them.
for them and the people in their little reality bubble. Because
Mm.
everybody, I like the reality bubble analogy a lot. Every single person on this planet is living in their own independent reality bubble,
Hmm.
and every single one of them are completely different based on their the situations and circumstances and interactions and encounters and information and all of the things that they've experienced up until that point. So, which makes them malleable. They're always morphing, and what one person sees as fact and truth and reality could be completely different from what another person sees as truth and
And
fact.
neither are wrong.
And neither are wrong.
Yeah.
And what's most important is that we can all figure out a way to be our healthiest, happiest versions of ourselves. Because when we're our healthiest, happiest versions of ourselves, we have, the cup runneth over and we are able to fill other people's cups and help them get to their healthiest and happiest versions. And we can collectively, through the ripples of our interactions and actions, make a better place for us all. Whereas if you're suppressing things or hiding things or shameful of things, you have the emotional guidance scale, and when you're down towards the lower levels of that, which is shame, despair, regret, all of those negative emotions, unhelpful emotions. Positive and negative are relative, good and bad. Just, they're all depending on the person. But helpful and unhelpful is what really matters. And if you have those helpful emotions that help you get through to a better place to cope with the terror of life, because I mean, my family weren't terribly far off. Life is terrifying, life is scary, but it's also beautiful. It's also safe. It has those corresponding,
Polarity.
yeah, polarities, so that we can live in the contrast of experience.
Well, and and you're not wrong about the politicizing. I mean, even the book, even Forbidden Alchemy, is a form of political activism. And I wrote the foreword, I wrote the introduction with that in mind because I do believe that people in their pleasure, and so for me that means aliveness, right? So people who know what makes them feel alive, and they go and they know how to go out and get that and achieve that aliveness. I believe that that makes them less governable by systems that rule from fear and control. And so, make no mistake, the book is a form of pleasure activism on purpose. Like people will ask me, like, how can you be talking about pleasure given the political climate, as it sits today? And I'm like, this is exactly why and when we should be talking about pleasure. People have to have a direction to go in. And the direction is, fuck that. I'm going to focus on me and what makes me feel alive and what makes me feel my community feel alive. And regenerative community is actually part of the pleasure renaissance too, the pleasure renaissance being that global movement. It's about pleasure literacy, so teaching people about this idea of the point of view of like reaching for aliveness and pleasure as a way of living. Pleasure literacy is also about the console of the body itself. Like your body, I'm sure you've experienced this. Your body's constantly giving you messages like which direction to go in, a yes or a no, when your fear comes up, when a flash of arousal comes up. That's all information, and we have to learn our console of our body. And another one is of sensual aliveness. So again, learning how to like sit at a meal and really experience it as like in a sacred way. Regenerative community. So like what we're talking about in terms of like our aliveness and our in the community's values of aliveness. And then lastly, the last pillar of the pleasure renaissance is about what I call myth making, and it's all about what are we teaching the kids that are left behind? What legacies are we leaving? So like I'm gonna start meeting with like game designers and TV producers and filmmakers about, what does it mean to create pleasure-centered programming? And again, how are we changing the cultural narrative from spirituality and sexuality can't live in the same space, or pleasure is an indulgence or a reward instead of like this natural way for us to live? So changing that cultural narrative by what are the games that we're building? What are the films that we're building? What is the new fairy tale look like compared to what it looked like before?
Yeah. It's so funny that you said a second ago about how, with the world and the state that it's in. I'm paraphrasing, but the world, the state that it's in, how could you be thinking about that? And it's so funny because people don't realize that the world's literally always been ending. There's always been some kind of catastrophic something or another going on.
Hmm.
So in that sense, like it, but it's the safest time in recorded history also to live. So it's so funny people's reality bubbles that they're living in and when they
Yeah.
share
Yeah.
with us what's in them.
There's so
But
much good happening as well. It's just not as popular to advertise that. But when you get on certain platforms and you're looking for the good that's happening in the world, you'll find it. And there's so much more than you ever think there is.
oh yeah, and then there's that cliche bumper sticker of, be the good that you want to see in the world.
Mm.
So you can believe that it's there if you can be that. It I was thinking about this the other day, just out of nowhere. I don't know what even caused it to pop in my head, but how some people believe that there is no good in the world.
Hmm.
And that's so sad. And
Yeah.
then it made me just sit there and contemplate how they feel about who they are as a person. Because if you believe that there is no good in the world, you must believe that there is no good within you either. And
Mm.
but the I super, super believe in the power of uh, video games and movies and literature and the entertainment of the world. That's time and time again, that has had a major impact. It's made waves instead of ripples through society and culture. Music does amazing things to
Yeah.
push societies and cultures in one direction or another. So super cool. How do you feel about hedonism though?
I know that a lot of people we define hedonism differently. I like the word hedonism personally, but I think that I like it more when I actually use like Epicurean, because there's like an implication of, rather than it being just this, let's say, like structureless or thoughtless approach to I want something and so I'm going to go after it and get it. It's like it's with a lens of artisanry. I want to be the artist of my life. I want to experience life like it's a masterpiece. And so like I'm kind of toying with this, like I like hedonism, but I like Epicureanism better, but that sort of like tends to be about food. But it's like I want to come up with like a new vernacular for like those two words pushed together somehow.
Well, language is an art, and that's what people forget, and that's why it drives me crazy when you have like grammar Nazis and
Yeah,
whatnot.
sure.
Because and then when I was trying to name my children, it was like it was like pulling teeth. I could not get people to understand that every name just started out as a sound. It was a made up sound in the beginning. A chair is a chair because someone looked at it and was like, I don't know,
Right.
here, let's put these sounds together and call it that. It
On
all,
our surnames started off as our occupation. So like cobbler and cooper and smith, that was like a blacksmith or a metalsmith. And yeah,
yeah, it's fun. The proper grammar only, like, who decided the rules of what proper grammar was?
right,
Uh, Turns out that the way we decided that was that someone just adopted, or people started to adopt the way that the leaders of the village spoke as something else that they should look up to as to the leaders.
right,
The leaders
right.
spoke this certain way, so that must be the correct way to speak. And I want to sound important and leadery as well. So that's it. Every bit of
Hmm.
it was just made up. So
Yeah,
uh, and then like what Shakespeare created, he himself, like, I don't have a clue how many words, but there's just a lot of them. He created. I don't want to misspeak and say it was 1,000 or 200 or whatever. I don't remember how many it was, but I remember it was a lot. So you absolutely can just wordsmith anything you like, and I think that's
yeah.
really
My hedonism, Epicureanism, I'll figure it out. I mean, aliveness is kind of it. Aliveness kind of helps me.
yeah. Well, we're all of us in the space of like alchemy and energy healing and energy work, like all of these, uh, all of this little area, it we're struggling to, and we have been struggling for a few years at least, to find the correct words to accurately express the thoughts, which are incredibly complex but also super simple. And I was talking yesterday on the previous episode to this one about how it's a it's kind of hard because when you're in this space, it's the monk mentality. You get to a place where it's like you understand that people can only hear you as deeply as they're ready. And once you get past the complexities and you start seeing the simple patterns underneath, because that's with any kind of mastery of anything. It starts out complicated, complex. You don't know what you don't know. And then you start learning all of the things, and then all of the patterns start to come together, and it becomes less and less complex as you go until it's super simple. Um, What's funny is that this area of expertise is you get it to a certain point where you're done with words and you don't even want to use them anymore. You don't even want to
Mm,
talk anymore. You just want to sit
mm,
and listen and nod and smile because honestly, there's when people are receptive
right. I see
and
what you're saying.
when
Yes.
it's a complete waste of your time anyway.
Yes. Hmm.
So I think that has made the difficulties of what words do I use to even explain these things,
Right.
because those who are ready to understand have followed probably a similar path to where you have, so they found the words. They found the definitions and they did the meditation work or the thought processes or the shadow work or the journaling or the whatever to get to that place. But making it more digestible, you have to meet people with where they're at, and most people are pretty, I don't know if I'd say most people, that's rude of me. There's a very shallow area that the majority has very, for a long time now, stood in, with their floaties, uninterested in the depths. So we're
Yeah,
creating new
because
ways.
it's scary. It's a scary place to go that deep within oneself. And I'll tell you, like on my journey of like how much more can I allow in my life? How much happiness, how much joy, how much pleasure, how much aliveness. I remember very vividly like kind of having the embodied feeling of what the level of empowerment that was reachable to me if I were to let that much joy into my life and being terrified
Yeah.
of it. It was so potent. The literally the level of power. was so potent that I remember thinking, I remember thinking like, why am I so scared? I am terrified, and I have no idea why that is so terrifying.
Sure. And when you come from tragedy
Mm,
also, and
mm,
when you've experienced lack and tragedy and legitimate reasons to be afraid,
yeah.
having anything, allowing anything good and happy in your life is scary because you don't want to get too attached to it because that's just a recipe for disaster. I've been there before. I've seen that show. I've seen that episode. If I get that hurt, and so now I'm going to protect myself. So then you throw all these walls up and you put yourself in a nice little cozy box of safety. That's just an illusion because there is no actual safety. No matter what we do, it's all just a projection of safety. It's a illusion. And so when you're denying yourself the pleasures of life for safety reasons, you know, it's problematic in a lot of ways. And then you end up
That
angry.
was my whole life. That was literally my whole life. I lived a muted version of my life until I was willing to, I was willing to sort of say, I even hesitate to say, I was going to say deserving enough because I don't believe in the word deserving. Like once you're on the spiritual path, there's no deserving. I don't have to earn anything. I don't have to prove anything. I just have to like, embody and irradiate a certain frequency of self-love.
Hmm.
But I remember at the time when I did think of it that way, and I was like, what if I just decided that I was worth saying yes to? I was worth falling in love with over and over and over again. And so it was an incremental and long journey. And ultimately that's like why I'm writing these books, why I'm leading this movement. I'm trying, my effort is to make other people's journeys gentler and more efficient and more pleasurable than mine was.
Hmm. Yeah, it's
Because you
so
can use,
sad, right? You mourn the time you lost because um
yeah.
the other day at a Christmas party with my family, um, I made the comment of how we need to figure out what makes us happy real quick because we're all going to die soon. And yeah,
Real
oops.
quick, let's do it
Oops.
tonight.
My husband like leaned over and hit me on the leg. He was like smack. Like, stop. And I was, oh crap. Sorry, the mask fell off for a second. But when you really put into you put it into what's the word? Visual, you see the whole thing. We get what, 100 years if we're
Right?
lucky.
Right. The
If
big
we're
picture.
Yeah, if we're super lucky, I don't know, 120, I think's what
Right.
a couple of people's made it to these days. And
Hmm.
with the advancements in technology and health, who knows what the future holds for us? Maybe we'll knock it back up to like 400 like Noah did or something. That'd be great, I guess, maybe. But only if you're having a good time with it, right? And
Yeah.
so there's so many people who they spend their life denying themselves these things, uh, not only because of self-worth issues, but also because they want to be a good person, and their religious past says that being a good person is denying yourself all of these things.
Yes.
Uh,
That's like the monk version of the mystic, like the way that they try to tell us like the asceticism and like I should strip everything down and I should have own nothing, want nothing. That's such a restrictive way and not of to not feel alive for
mhm,
me, and I know that people will have a lot to say about my message and my movement. And, they are the ones limiting themselves and limiting the amount of joy and like I believe that the amount of pleasure we can hold, that we allow ourselves, that's the same as how much wealth can we attract, how much love,
mhm,
how deep of a love can we attract, how much prosperity can we hold. I think that they're the same.
mhm,
And if I had any advice, like for anybody listening, that's like, well, where do I start? It's like, what if you just allowed yourself to have that thought, whatever the thought is, the forbidden thought, And instead of shaming yourself for that or suppressing the thought, just let the thought be present and love yourself for whatever it was, whatever the life circumstance was. And it might not even just be this lifetime. As a multidimensional healer, I've dealt with ancestral inheritance and past life integration too. But like allow yourself to just have the thought and be witness to it and know and love and have compassion for the version of you who had to create that thought in as a way to protect you, like to keep it hidden.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
like just allowing the thought is the start of like the pleasure and like taking the charge down and not rejecting yourself.
Yeah, you can be the witness without entangling your identity into the thing. Uh, an
Great way to
exercise
say
that
it. It's a great way to say it.
an exercise that a lot of people find helpful that you find in shadow work and whatnot is giving your, we'll call it alter ego, right? A name. So when these thoughts pop up into your head, as they're
Yeah.
going to, because we're human and that's what happens, you don't have to you don't have to be like, oh no, what's wrong with me? What a sick thought. Are you kidding me? And then, shame spiral. You can be like, Gosh, Susan, what are you doing? What you doing over there? You having a good time? And then,
And I would even offer even one step further. Of course you think that way, little Sharon. Like, of course you think that way because of your experience. So, yes, like that. And that's it. You don't even have to do more except acknowledge, except witness and acknowledge.
yeah. Because the worst thing in the world is to wake up at age like 50, 60, 70 and been like, oh crap,
Mm,
things are dwindling. My time is running. And that's a scary thought. I talk about mortality a lot because I think a lot of people avoid that.
mm.
They just the human aspects of life that are taboo, are scary, finding coping, finding coping and ways to be happy. That's that's the name of the game. I've had a couple of people ask me, this has been a big topic lately, is what is the purpose of it all? What is the purpose of you? What is the purpose of me? Someone recently on an episode was trying to get me to tell them what my purpose was. They were like, is your purpose to bring certain types of information to people? Are you trying to change the world? And I'm like, used to, that's what I thought. I used to thought that that was the purpose. That's what I was trying to do was change the world. And and I could go into depths about why and how that landed, but the past like year or two, I don't know what is time. Uh, the purpose has just been to have fun.
Yeah. I would argue to be fully expressed, that you feel more fully expressed by hosting this podcast. And I talk about pleasure as a technology because I believe, like, kind of like what you're implying, I do believe that it's not so much that we have a purpose, but we do have like a legacy to leave behind in just the life that we live.
Hmm.
That's the legacy. And yeah, some of us are more like me, more public about like, I think I have a lesson if you want the lesson. I think I have some wisdom if you want the wisdom. But I think that like, how do we ever know? Like, how do we ever know we're on that path to our dharma, like to our purpose or to whatever that legacy and message is that we're meant to leave behind? And I believe pleasure is the answer to that question. Because if life is always presenting us two options, and of course there's more than two, but like if we were able to boil it down to like this direction or that direction, and you always go in the direction of what makes you feel most alive, you will continue to raise your consciousness. You will unlock your dharma or your purpose. You will call in your highest timeline. I literally think it is like if we were, because I worked in video games, like I believe we're the god of this game. We're both the main character and we realize we're the game designer. That's the consciousness unlock. And once you realize that, it's about learning the game controls, like learning how to thrive and play in the game. And so again, what's one of the unlocks? I think pleasure, aliveness, and pleasure is an unlock for you to how to win at the mythic level, the
Hmm.
mythic level of the game.
Yeah, I love relating things back to life being a video game because I I've been doing that for a while and I used to get really like weird looks because people in this area don't tend to play video games or watch anime. But which is funny considering that comes mostly from like anime especially comes from Japan. Then they're way ahead of us on all of this connected to all things ancient wisdom stuff in some ways. It's anyway, that could be a whole nother episode in and of itself. But coming back to life as a video game to its deepest core in the sense of you can look at every single thing that you do and task that you take on and like everything you eat for example either adds to your HP or takes away from it. And
Right.
when you can put rules and regulations around your life, that becomes the practice, the discipline, the playing to win. But
Playing to thrive, even. Yeah. And I don't know how much you guys talk about like manifestation or the law of attraction or anything that on this podcast, but you know, there's a guy named David R. Hawkins who's actually done measurements, and I'm sure you know this, like so like what we talked about is the negative emotions or the more unhelpful emotions versus more helpful emotions.
mhm,
They actually vibrate at different frequencies, which
mhm,
makes perfect sense. Well, there's a high that there's a, it's called a map of consciousness. And so there's a spectrum of those emotions from the lowest, like apathy and despair, all the way up to enlightenment, right?
mhm,
And everyone thinks that love or unconditional love is the highest form of emotion that you can be holding. But according to the chart, it's actually only halfway up the scale.
mhm.
So of a scale of 1,000, love is only 500. And guess what? So when we go to like use love and like positive affirmations and positive thinking as we imagine what we want, or even using climax, because that's a high vibration too. But like what's above love is joy, bliss, ecstasy. So you can use so pleasure is actually a more potent manifestation tool because it literally is a higher frequency carrier wave. So if you go to daydream what you want and imagine yourself already having it and flood yourself with the mind body sensations of like the feelings of freedom and the feelings of excitement and pleasure, that manifestation will come to you faster and it will come to you with more precision. So you can use pleasure and arousal and that creation energy like we're talking about like as an absolute again like an unlock in a video game. My motto or my slogan is you are the god of the game, your body is the console, and your pleasures are the cheat codes. And I really believe, and now I'm just playing like, am I right, is it true? And so I'm just literally playing as if life is that, and then continuing to continue to collect information. And so far so good is my experience.
Yeah. Something that came up for me while you were speaking about all of that was addiction and drugs and how that's probably the trap that comes along with those and why they become so addictive is it's synthetic. It's those feelings, but in a synthetic way that you don't have to like work towards in your daily life.
So that's where the differentiation is are you chasing a relief of suffering, right? Or an escape from suffering? That's the addiction. Because you can use alcohol and certain kinds of drugs in a way that they aren't drugs. They aren't addicted. That you can use them as sacrament. If like, you can use, mushroom, plant medicine mushroom as an escape and just like to go to a party and rave all night, or you can use plant medicine mushroom as a way to unlock more of your consciousness. And so it's not the drug, it's not the substance, but it's what are you bringing, what kind of presence are you bringing to the moment, and what kind of intentions are you holding when you go to participate in those
Yeah,
substances.
yeah, that makes sense. Well, this
So
has been fun.
addiction is such a desperate reach for love, for self-love, right? They're reaching
Yeah.
outward for love and probably not getting it, and they don't know how to give themselves the love from within. In the same way, we go circling all the way back to the beginning of our conversation, is they hold some shame about who they are and their worthiness, and that's what stops them. from that self-love, and then they turn to those escapes.
Yeah. I've never struggled with addiction myself. But my cousin who he was the same age as I was, so we grew up very, very close, and we lost him a couple of years ago to addiction. Addiction itself didn't kill him. It wrecked his body, and
Yeah.
then he contracted the flu, and it was just
Wow.
long story short, that was all she wrote. So I think about it a lot because I think about him a lot. And
Yeah.
then I come across people, not super regularly, but semi-regularly, who confide in me about their own addiction struggles or the struggles of a loved one in their space that is struggling with addiction. So there's a book that helped me a lot right after his death called Demon Copperhead.
Mm.
You heard of that?
Mm-mm.
It is so good. It's so good. I don't know if you would relate to it as much as I did because it's the setting is the Appalachian area, which is where I'm from. So
Sure. Yeah.
yeah, but it follows the underlying addiction things.
Yeah.
For example, like when he died, it was what was really hard about that is that I was everybody wanted to blame him and I wasn't allowed to be upset about it, essentially. It was like, oh well, he did it to himself. And that was hard. But when you really understand the underlying causes of addiction, I don't know. I don't know. We could
No, I'm with you because again, it's a desperate reach for love.
hmm
And they don't and we we're still learning that emotional literacy that we spoke about. We're still evolving that. We're still getting better at that. And so like
hmm
we don't know we are only just now like in the effort that you are in parenting your young one, starting to say, okay, what are the conversations that we need to have? How can like in terms of like preventing addiction, it's like how much can I teach my children to love themselves? How can
Yeah.
I teach them to be discerning about the messages that they're receiving that contradict that idea that they might
hmm
love themselves or that they're worthy of their own love and worthy of love from someone else? So yeah, it's a real problem. It's a real and I hate to even frame it that way. Let's say
Well, it's a
it's a
learning
real
curve.
I was gonna more than that. Like I'm looking for positive. Like I'm like it's what a gift it is that we have the contrast of like your friend and like my brother who passed really young too. Like we have the gift of these examples so that we make more of an effort for the people coming after us so that those kinds of things won't be repeated. So that's the gift in the tragedy.
Sure, sure. And um, there's no sense in blame. Like
Yeah.
people always want to blame themselves. I could have done more, or they blame other people. They should have not. They should have done. And the truth of the matter is that each and every one of us are, again, only human and only capable of doing our best with the information that we have and up until this point, and then going back to historically, people were struggling for food, water, shelter, your basic survival needs at the bottom of Maslow's pyramid. So I think we really, once you can't really focus on emotions and self-actualization and purpose and connection until you get those basic needs met. And when you have generations deep, plural, of not having those needs met, then once you do have those needs met, nobody knows what to do with the next levels. They don't,
That's the gap. That's
yeah,
the gap between safety and pleasure. Yeah.
yeah. So
And
we're
I
all
would I would
collectively
argue that
learning.
it's also about the perception of those needs being met. Because there are people who are wealthier than the ones who aren't, who still perceive that those needs are not being met. And
Hmm.
so, and again, there are super, let's say, poor people who also feel totally satisfied with their lives. There's lots of poor in India, for example, who are super satisfied with their lives, and they're compared to like the way that we live, they're even more destitute, and yet they're still able to achieve that sense of wholeness even amongst that. So again, it's a choice on how we're going to perceive the life that we're living and the meal that's in front of us and the connection of the person that we're sharing time with.
Yeah, no matter what the situation and circumstances are, you can always choose to look for the good and be the light or the sunshine or, pick your bumper sticker flavor, whatever. Or you can be the problem. You can be the
Right.
issue. You can be the one who drags everybody down. And whatever you're used to doing, whatever you're used to focusing on, a lot of times that's given to us in our childhood
Yeah.
from others.
Yeah.
So it's not easy to turn that momentum train around or stop it, but it is possible, and we all can do it at any point in time.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like a living testament to that myself, but for my childhood being what it is, but for my mother being a really challenging parent, I wouldn't have pursued the lifestyle and like the life shift that I'm in the middle of now that I now get to share with other people to help them, they're below and I have that handout, and I'm ready to pull them up if that's what they want. And so like I recognize the gift of the challenge of my childhood because it led me to becoming the leader of this message that I get to deliver now, and that feels like a real privilege.
Yeah, I like that. It took me a really long time to reach that point.
Yeah, me too.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I agree completely. Our we can't really control the cards that we're dealt. We can only control how we choose to play them and lay
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And we can, if we want to be the victim, we can be the victim. Like we
Yep.
can you create your own character,
Yep.
if it's a
Yep.
video game.
Just don't live there forever, but yeah.
But you can, just like you can play the victim your whole life, which, I mean, if do free will, I believe in freedom, believe in what makes you happy. But chances are that playing the victim doesn't actually make you happy. It probably doesn't actually make you feel very fulfilled or worthy
Mhm.
or self-loved or whatever, whatever.
Even when you're right, you're still in the middle of the battle. You're still in the war.
Hmm. But we can make decisions every single day to be the hero of our own story.
Yeah, I think of Westworld. I don't know if that was a TV show that you've ever watched, but
I've seen
I
it, yeah.
think I think of us as literally being dropped into our little Westworld stories. And so again, once you become conscious and you're aware, oh, I've been dropped in this story, I become the steward of that story. And like I love film, right? So I used to write in film as well. And I love the hero's journey. And so like if I see my life as the story, a character in a movie, you know, I can choose to still live, with that whole backstory being the thing that runs my life, or I can choose to continually stretch myself and put myself at that edge and challenge all of my fears and challenge all of my internal dialogue and become the hero, by the end of that story. And that is, that's the effort for me.
Yeah, life is a stage. Life is it's a show, and
Back to Shakespeare.
you can be whoever, you can be whatever character you want. And I think that most of us would agree that the characters that we always love the most in shows, movies, whatever, 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 books, is the hero. It's the person who's stoic and always puts their values and their priority, they're chivalrous, which can mean a lot of different things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's it. I mean, that's it. What's going to be the storyline that are you going to triumph at the end of your story? Are you going to keep to stretch? Because those wins don't happen by just gliding through life and never stretching oneself or never challenging your fears. It's the opposite. It's
It is the
exactly that,
opposite. The best heroes always have the most tragic backstories.
right? And they have to challenge the deepest of their fears. And again, like I feel like that's part of the storyline that I did with that shame programming that was instilled in me so young. Because it said, the programming said, I'm wrong, right?
Mhm.
Not just what I was doing was wrong. And I ended up developing like an incest fetish, right? So I like fantasy and stuff like that because again, it was so suppressed and so hidden. It was another layer of shame that I
Mhm.
got to, inflict on myself for something that, of course, seems so natural now. And I can't tell you, of course, how many people private message me after I started speaking about, like, hey, it's okay for you to decide that, to own the fact that maybe those childhood experiences, because I know I'm so not alone in having them, you
Mhm.
know, it's possible for you to say that that might have been pleasurable for you. And it's okay to reclaim the innocence of that version of you and their pleasure in those moments. It's huge. It's huge and scary, but super healing as well.
Absolutely. It needs to be talked about because people need to hear that they're not alone so that they have the opportunities to and resources
Yeah.
to understand and process and integrate and come out the other end the healthiest version of themselves.
Yeah. There are exercises in this book and the second book, which is coming out in February. There are exercises at the ends of every chapter too, where you can start to get to know yourself. There are journaling prompts and stuff like you mentioned earlier about like the dark masculine and the dark feminine within you. And they kind of, you can even journal in such a way that you have a dialogue from within yourself. And again, with the goal being to not just like tolerate these voices inside of you, but really call them home, really, really understand where they came from, and like welcoming them back to be integrated, into the self.
Yeah. Well, tell people where to find it, where to find you, and
Yeah, well, the book is traditionally published through a publisher, Grace Point Publishing. So it's available everywhere books are sold, including bookstores and libraries. And then certainly, if anybody wants to find me, I'm at SharonMarieScott.com. I have a Substack account as well. And my platform is called Life Turned On. So if you go to YouTube or if you go to TikTok or if you go to IG, you tend to find me at Life Turned On. So thanks for asking.
yeah, yeah, thanks for doing what you do. I think it's really important to bring all of this out of the shadows so that we can move forward in a more positive manner for
Yeah.
everybody
As a
included.
collective. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. So thanks. Thanks for giving me the platform to talk about it. It's
Yeah,
brave. It's brave conversation, and I really appreciate the invitation.
it is brave conversation. I was so nervous.
Aw.
Well, remember, and you shattered this for me a little bit, which is fine. I live for my beliefs to be shattered. Um, but the reason I like to talk always about where people are from and where they grew up is because I had a really hard time growing up in the area that I grew up in, which is,
Mm.
the Bible Belt. It's super religious, not conforming, it is conservative.
Conservative. Yeah.
What I'm looking for. So like literally everything was taboo and that was really hard for me. And I had a really hard time for a while. Like I was angry about where I was stuck, like geographically. And like
Mm.
I went to all these therapists and coaches and was like, help. And they every single time, every one of them were like, Savannah, you're fine. If we took you and dropped you into, this location or that location, you would thrive and you would be so normal and you would be so mild and you would just, I'm like, well, that's wonderful. That's great. But I'm here. This is where I am. Do you have any advice for where I am?
Mm.
Um, but the truth of the matter is like it doesn't matter where you come from. We all struggle with more or less the same things because it's all humanity and it's all humanness. But literally 5 years ago, I still felt like I was going to be burned at the stake for speaking about these things.
Even in the context of the alternative lifestyles communities that I am a leader and proud steward of, I am considered counterculture. I've been accused of it in the last year. I'm too counterculture for the counterculture that I'm already a part of. Like, There's a thing.
Wonderful. Like
Right? Right?
you can't win. You can't win.
Right? Right.
My daughter
I
did.
think I'm winning. I'm choosing to interpret it that as winning.
Oh, absolutely. It's all perception. Um,
Yeah.
my daughter yesterday, she likes to sing and she started recording herself making and she comes up with these songs. What's the word? Freestyle. She freestyles songs that sound pretty decent for a 7-year-old, you know?
Yeah.
I'm like
Love it.
super impressed. And she'll video herself. Of course, we don't put anything like that online for her yet. Um, but I have to sit through these, 3 or 4 minute long videos.
You have to.
I have to. Which I'm continuously impressed by. But
Of
anyway,
course.
she told me yesterday, she said, I really want to be a singer. I was like, that sounds awesome. Sounds like a lot of fun. I said, go do that and make me lots of money. We can have a big house. We can do things. She went, I'm scared though. I was like, oh, of what? She said, what if I put my songs out there and no one likes them? I was like, well, there's gonna be some people that don't like them. She was like, oh, I can't handle that. I'm not gonna be able to do that. I told her, I said, well, there's always going to be someone that does not like you and what you do. Always. There's literally nothing, no path that you could ever take in life that is going to make every single person like you or what you do. So you might as well just do what you like and what makes you like you and
Fully
what's
expressed.
fun.
Yeah.
And some people will be like, "Oh, you're fun. I like you." And other people are gonna probably tell you that you're garbage.
Yeah.
She's like, what if they say mean things? I was like, oh, they're going to. And she was like, ah, she's appalled. She's so sweet. And I was like, I was like, there's gonna be people that are gonna tell you that you should never make another song ever. There's going to be people who tell you that you should take this down, that you should never go into mute. Like, there's going to be people that say all sorts of things, but you have to do what makes you happy. But anyway, I try to live by that myself.
Hmm.
I see that you are too, and that's
Yeah,
wonderful.
boy.
It takes a lot of
I
courage.
don't feel like I have any choice anymore. And it does. I get to acknowledge my courage every fucking day. Like and I don't feel like I have a choice anymore. It does my the thought of not being fully expressed is bigger to me than the fear of rejection and by society.
That's good.
So that's me loving myself more. And so I look forward to the update on your daughter making that choice and loving herself more every
Yeah,
time.
I would love
Every
to have
morning.
you come back on. The episodes that go well, I always like to invite you on in like another year or so, and we can touch base and just do another episode and see where life has taken us and who we
Yeah,
are now, because we're all different people every single day. So if you'd be
I
interested,
would love to come back. Yeah, the second book comes out in February. I don't know when the third book will come out. I've already written a draft of the third book, but we'll have plenty to talk about. I'll have an update on this larger global movement of the pleasure renaissance, and that's a super exciting, endeavor that will ultimately fill up the rest of my life in accomplishing. So
beautiful.
happy to talk about that.
Cool. Well, we'll let everybody go.